Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode with me, April Federico of Brownies for Breakfast. And today we have Deborah Charnes. She is a certified yoga therapist specializing in blood sugar management. She is the best-selling author of From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram. Wisdom for Mind, Body, and Spirit, which just won two gold awards from the Florida Authors and Publishers Association and an honorable mention from the International Latino Book Awards. In addition, she makes the best gluten-free, low glycemic, high protein brownies. And yeah, so welcome, Deborah.
It's nice to be here. I should also mention that I also make bliss balls, and of course, they're all vegan, gluten-free, sugar-free, and I make them with all different things.
Yum. Yeah, we were just talking about that before this recorded. So tell us, Deborah, what is a yoga therapist and what are the benefits of yoga therapy?
Well, interesting. That's such a common question. I hear it all the time, and I've actually created several different videos on my YouTube channel that
Oh,
kind of talk about that, and they also talk about when you should see a yoga therapist. But and also the different kinds of yoga therapists, because just like with any professional, everyone's different, right? So
right.
we have international certification, and international certification requires between 800 to 1,000 hours, and everything is very rigid in terms of what those hours entail.
Mhm.
And I believe 100 of those hours have to be actual practice, where I know when I got my certification, I had to submit case studies of people that I had been working with, what were the concerns and the issues they had, what track did I put them on, and then what happened later. So we are very, for the most part, we are very grounded and very research based and fact based. But my type of yoga therapy is very much grounded in Ayurveda.
Mm.
And last week was actually World Ayurveda Day. And
Oh,
and today in both of my yoga classes, I asked everybody, what do you know about Ayurveda? And for the most part, nobody really knew anything about Ayurveda. So, one of the chapters in my book is all about Ayurveda from a digestive health standpoint. And the chapter in that book is the chapter in my book that's about Ayurveda. It's called Go With Your Gut. And it specifically talks about how gut health affects everything.
mm-hmm.
So when somebody comes to me for yoga therapy, first of all, I do a 90 to 120-minute intake.
Wow.
That's really a deep dive. I do a musculoskeletal analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I check them out. I have them do a lot of things, but I ask them questions. Of course, I want to see their medical history, but I also want to know about their lifestyle. And a perfect example is I'm also trained as I'm a certified prenatal and postpartum yoga instructor. And so, what's super common with young moms is they lug around their baby on one side, you know. And when you do that, your other shoulder kind of comes up, and
Yep,
and then your entire body is out of alignment. So,
exactly.
so that's just one example, but let's take people that golf.
Mm-hmm.
If you're golfing, it's also one-sided, and you're gonna, you know, wreck the balance. And what I was telling my students today about, of course, I read to them from my book about what Ayurveda is and how I got into Ayurveda, but to me, it's about finding balance. And it's about, you don't take drugs, you don't take an aspirin or an antihistamine to mask the problem. You delve deep. What is the underlying problem? And then you solve that in natural ways. And it's not just about, popping pills. Again, it's the herbal pills if you pop anything, but it's lifestyle.
Right.
So what I explained, for example, today is I live in Texas where it's always hot and humid. But today was we had no sun and we had wind. And what that does is that aggravates certain things. So because of that, you need to eat differently, even for those specific days. So it's very complex, but it's basically finding the root problem and finding balance.
That's really interesting. And it's interesting that you say finding the root problem. And that is something that has come up in multiple podcast episodes of mine. And speaking of root causes, I am curious about the title of your book. Why do you mention a boxing ring?
It's from the boxing ring to the ashram, and also what many people don't know what an ashram is. And an ashram is a center for spiritual growth and education and development. But the reason why I call it from the boxing ring to the ashram is because I basically chronicle, of course, my life and my issues and my successes, but I highlight in my 12 chapters 12 of my teachers around the world and what I've learned from them. And one of them was a professional world ranked female boxer. And she had a lot of PTSD. She had chronic pain. She had dementia pugilistica, which is
Oh,
basically traumatic brain injuries.
yeah.
And she is such a beautiful person. She is so positive with everything she does. And her chapter is all about gratitude. And so the concept of from the boxing ring to the ashram to it's very much to me a dichotomy because we tend to think of boxing as being, at least I think of it as being brutal and dangerous, which it is, but my boxer is the most peaceful woman and most positive minded woman that I know. And she's now a Tai Chi instructor. So it that encapsulates, and that's actually the last chapter in my book. And I've had people tell me that they were crying when they got to that chapter. And to me,
Oh,
that encapsulates that every one of us can improve our physical and emotional and spiritual well-being. It might not be as easy as taking an aspirin,
right, right.
but we can do that.
Yeah, and I really like how you mentioned that you know, that people were crying when they got to the chapter. I mean, it's not good that people were crying, but like it's a good that like people felt that connection. Um,
But they were crying happy tears.
happy tears. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Rejoicing.
That's great. Yeah, and it's like all about that connection. I mean, as a storyteller myself, I have connected with people on like a cellular level. I always struggle to pronounce that word, so forgive me, but um and it's interesting because you get to the root cause of basically everything and it all comes down to the cells. And like when one thing goes wrong, the whole system goes haywire. And it's also interesting how you bring up like, first time moms and how they're always lugging their babies to like to like one side of their body. And of course, when one thing starts, the whole system collapses. Yeah, and yeah, so what was the process of gathering all the information needed for your book? I'm curious.
Actually, the entire concept and even the outline and even the marketing plan of my book materialized in my head as I was doing a 3-day self-managed silent meditation.
Wow.
And you know what, I was talking about the wind today, and the from an Ayurvedic perspective, wind is vata, which is so. And when people have too much vata, we're moving all the time, and
Yeah.
our society pushes us to constantly be doing, moving, and that exacerbates the vata.
Hmm.
And we all need to disconnect and find the silence and tune in. And one of the chapters in my book is about um, my Ayurvedic doctor told me, and of course I'm super chill. I'm a yoga instructor and I'm super chill, but he told me that I needed 1 day a week to disconnect from all my devices. It's basically like a secular Sabbath.
Yeah.
And he said, even in terms of driving your car, even though you might think, oh, we all drive, but that it affects you. And we all need to slow down. And unfortunately, our society tells us the opposite. And that's also why on election night, I'm going to be offering what I call like a tune in meditation and sound healing, because
Mhm.
I don't think people should tune into the news.
Yeah.
They should just tune into themselves.
Exactly. And yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because as a society, at least in America, like we're always on the go. And what advice would you give to someone like specifically someone like me who like cannot shut her brain off? Like I deal with like anxiety, like depression, PTSD, the whole package, but like so my brain is constantly thinking like, okay, I need to go from one thing to the next. And it doesn't help that I'm an entrepreneur. So it's like which way's up, which way's down? I don't know, crash. And so yeah, what advice would you give to someone like me who like just needs that moment of stillness?
Well, I think I can identify
Mm-hmm.
ADHD is actually a vata trait,
Oh.
and we need to be more grounded. And the very first chapter in my book is about meditation. But what I say is meditation does not mean you have to be still and seated for an hour in the dark or whatever. There, you can do walking meditations, you can do mantra meditations, you can do so many different kinds of meditations that, if you need to constantly be moving, like I need to always be moving,
Hmm.
then there are other forms of meditation. The other thing is, a lot of people think that your brain should be completely like a blackboard, and you wipe that blackboard totally clean when you're meditating. No, that's not true. What meditation teaches us is to have one pointed concentration. And
Ah.
so that's why, again, for people like I would assume, like both of us, yes, I can sit in silence for a long time, but that is not that easy for a lot of people. And it took me a long time before I could get that. So what I recommend is, and I actually, every chapter in my book has 5 easy tips, and then I'll give it a try. So, I kind of walk you through it. So I'm just gonna, my five, let me just, my give it a try is for a 1 minute time out. And
Ah.
I have all different kinds of things. I have one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 different ideas for a 1 minute time out.
Ah.
So that should be a lot easier. And then the 5 easy tips, I'll just read. I'm not going to read the entire paragraph, just the headline of the 5 easy tips.
Hmm.
Learn to enjoy breathing.
Yep.
And then apply deep acceptance
Hmm.
wherever you are. Find a place to start. You know, everybody is different, and every one day to the next, you may be at a different um your mindfulness practice may be completely different from 1 hour to the next. Number four, be present. And number five, do not force it.
I love the last part. Do not force it.
So one of the things that we say in yoga all the time is, don't necessarily look at the teacher or the person in front of you and try to do what they're doing,
Right.
right? We have to do what's right for us.
Hmm.
And an anecdote that I tell in my book is back when I was working 80-hour corporate, 80-hour a week corporate job, there was a very high, um, high stress new business meeting that
Hmm.
we spend hundreds of hours to prepare for, and we were doing our dress rehearsal. The prospective client was about to come, and the person who was in charge of our team was being very disrespectful
Oh,
and just being, there was no um, kind of team cheer. It was
yeah.
more, denigrating. And we had maybe a 20-minute bio break, or to eat our food or whatever. And I
Mm.
went into my office, I closed the door, and I just focused on my breath. And before that, I just wanted to wring her neck. When I came out, I wanted to give her a hug.
Aw.
And so again, it was just, very short. And it was just in my office, but I knew I had to do something to let it pass.
Yeah. Yeah, that shows that breathing really does fix a lot of things. I recently discovered the benefits of breath work, and before we get into how you shifted from corporate to yoga therapy, I want to know, like, what are your thoughts on breath work?
So one, first of all, kind of to back and to tap into what you said,
Yeah.
another chapter in my book is based on an, a top ranking Harvard Medical School researcher who happens to be a lifelong yogi. And
Oh.
he's researched for 30 years yoga and the brain. And the chapter is specifically about yoga for PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Why? Because those are the three things that affect most of us,
Yeah.
or they're the most, they're everywhere. All of his research, when he talks about yoga, he is talking about four different components, and one is breath work.
Yeah.
So, meaning that we don't, it's not about the body. A lot of people think of yoga as the body, but breath work is the foundation of yoga. And
Yeah,
it's not yoga without the breath work.
exactly. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
And and I cite, in each one of my chapters, of course I cite my teachers who have
Yeah.
so much wisdom, but I also give research studies to back up everything.
Mhm.
Because again, you know, I I want to know that what I'm doing is going to make a difference.
Yeah, and I believe you are making a difference. Yeah, especially how you specialize in blood sugar management. How did you well, first let me ask you. So you said you were in the corporate environment. How did you switch over to yoga therapy?
I've always practiced yoga,
Yeah.
and I would say my entire, from the time I was an adolescent, because I had chronic low back pain and I
Oh.
also had digestive disorders. so, So different components of yoga helped each one.
Oh.
And in as far as the breath work in particular, the breath work was the only thing. And I didn't know what breath work was, right? I
Right,
didn't
right,
know what
right.
meditation was, but I discovered it on my own just because that was the only thing that would calm my pain.
Ah.
So I got into yoga very early in life. And then, like most of us, hey, we have to pay the bills, we have to support our family,
Hmm.
and we have to work, work, work. And, I had a lot of burdens. And so I felt there was no way that I could stop working. And I was always afraid that I was going to be laid off because my field was highly competitive and there were always layoffs. So I had to work my butt off.
Hmm.
And so finally, at the place where I was teaching yoga, there were 2 weeks in a row, there were talks by two different spiritual um, teachers.
Oh.
And I interpreted, so again, two different people, two different themes.
Yeah.
And yet, my interpretation of both was I need to leave my job because I'm doing the devil's work. So I was in the marketing communications field. I've always been a writer, but I was promoting things that I never ever believed in.
Yeah.
And but I had to because I had to pay the bills and everything. But
Right.
by by the time I decided to, okay, this is it, my daughter was not only in college, but she had a job where she had health insurance.
Oh.
And so I thought, okay, I don't need much for myself. So I, quit all that.
Wow. That is such an act of bravery. I mean, knowing that something isn't right for you, but like knowing you have to do it anyway. But I was recently watching a movie and the one of the actors had said, it takes a lot of courage, it takes more courage to leave a situation than it is to stay in one and just fight, 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 even when you know it's not right. So that is such an act of empowerment, and that is such an act of, sticking true to who you are.
Well, that's what I think is so important. And unfortunately, most of us, our society pushes us to fit into a mold.
Yeah.
And working, in the holistic fields is definitely not part of the mold. And
Mhm.
granted, it may be a lot more now than it was then,
Yeah.
especially, when we talk about, well, an example, my researcher with Harvard Medical School, I mentioned he's been researching for 30 years and he wanted to do his, I don't know if it was master's or doctoral thesis, he wanted it to be on yoga and the brain. And the people at his college said, at his university said, no, what, they're like, what's that? So he wasn't able to do that. He ended up, of course, living his life studying yoga and the brain, but he was not able to do his doctoral thesis on it.
Hmm. That's too bad. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was doing my undergraduate thesis and I really wanted to do like because I majored in creative writing, which is where my writing background really comes from. And and the fact of the matter is I stuck to my guns when I really wanted to do a screenplay for my creative portion of the thesis. And I did it, so be it. And yeah, it is what it is. I mean, I may not have gotten thesis of distinction, but you know what? What matters is that I was proud of it. And what matters is that you're proud of your work, and I am proud of your work. I mean, I wish there were more people like you because I learned
But
so much
yeah,
from you just now.
but for so long, and I had so many awards from the industry, from the marketing and public relations industry. I had tons of awards. You know, I always, it's I want to do well. But I wasn't proud of promoting products and services I didn't
Right.
believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was in the corporate environment as well, and I was working in an insurance company, which was definitely not my field of choice to begin with. Um, and finally, I was let go based on disability, which, by the way, is illegal. Um, and yeah, but really, it was just a blessing from the universe to you know, own your power and also to just own who you really are as a person. And who I really was an entrepreneur, especially in the holistic, diabetic, nutritional, and spiritual field as well. So
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I didn't make those changes in my life until I was pretty old. But
that's okay. We all go at our
yeah,
own pace.
yeah. And hopefully I'll still have loads and loads of time to live in my way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe in you. I believe in your work, and I cannot wait to read your book.
Thank you.
Yeah, so where can my audience find you? Do you have social media or do you have a website? I know you mentioned you have a YouTube channel.
So, but YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok, I'm not that active on it, but those are all my name, Deborah Charns. And then my website is deborahcharns.com. And Facebook is different.
Yeah.
Facebook is Namaste, and then
Ooh,
counsel, Counsel.
amazing. Yes, so this will all be in the show notes. And yeah, well, thank you so much, Deborah. I really appreciate your time and I learned so much from you just now. And now I'm just gonna go breathe and just concoct like a yoga schedule for myself because Lord knows I need it.
Well, it's always so nice to talk to like-minded people and people that share a lot, in terms of what we live and what we believe in as well.
That's the beauty of storytelling. I do have one last question for you. What would you say to someone who wants to tell their story, but just simply can't for some unknown reason? I know you shared your story and I know and the whole audience knows that you wrote a book at this point. So what would you say to someone who just wants to tell their story?
Are you talking about specifically writing or not? Because
Um, yeah, writing.
okay. Well, something that I found interesting is Lisa Marie Presley
Yeah,
has a new autobiography that was put together posthumously.
that's true.
And her daughter put it together, but she said it was based on her mother wanted to write a book,
Yeah.
and she had a lot of audio recordings.
Oh,
And so the daughter, I don't know if it's Kylie or Riley, but
Riley.
the daughter put it together based on all of the mother's audio recordings. And you and I obviously were, writing is in our blood, but for some people, it's a lot easier to talk. And so if that's the case, get an audio recorder and start. And then, of course, now there's what's it called, audio to, you know the apps where it takes your audio and converts it into your computer into a document, into a written
Yeah.
document. And then from there it just makes that first step a lot easier. So again, people, like, I know I always hear people talk about writer's block, and again, I've never ever had writer's block, but for those who do, think of it differently and think of it as, you want to share your story with, whether it be your children or even if you don't have children, but for the future generations, but what kind of legacy, or how can you share what you've learned and what you know with others?
Amazing.
Oh, I've got other ideas too. So, um, also meditate before you start to write.
Yes.
And then the other thing that I would do, and again, it's very easy for me to write, but just to kind of turn the switch in my brain that this is my writing session, is I had a photo of my mother who had passed away from diabetes.
I'm sorry.
And so I had a photo of her, and I would light candles and kind of like a mini altar. And she was a writer. And so I would kind of look at her photo and say, kind of connect with her, asking her to, guide me in my writing. And then that was just like an extra boost.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm like listening to you talk as I have like this letter from my grandmother who passed away last year from sepsis due to dementia. And and
I, yeah,
yeah, and it was it was like this it was like this pivotal moment that I had that like, she's with me. And in the card itself, it has like pictures of my mom. And I'm looking at it, I'm going like, this is like a generational thing that I could create. Like by creating, I mean like something to write, something to speak about, like a podcast. And yeah, that's just a really powerful thing.
that is beautiful that it's the three generations too. But when you said sepsis, I kind of like made a face because
Oh,
my mother, ultimately, it was sepsis, but she had, like so many with, and my mother was a very educated diabetic. She went to all the diabetic support groups. She knew so much about diabetes, but she, in the end, had uh, what's it called when the foot goes black?
I'm
Uh,
not sure.
yeah, when the foot goes black, when there's um, necrotic, there's a word. There's a word for it. So she ended up, having to have amputations. And
Oh,
then, as she was in the hospital, the ultimate cause of death was sepsis.
oh, I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
I'm very sorry to hear that. But that is such a beautiful thing that you said that, she guided you and I love the fact that you said meditate before you start writing because I know that like ADHD is a really big thing nowadays and it's coming to the surface now more than ever. And kind of blame social media for it, but there's a lot of reasons why that could happen. Why ADHD can happen, I should say. And because, like I said earlier, like I cannot shut my brain off for the life of me. So,
Right.
yes. So, this has been an episode of Brownies for Breakfast. Go check out Deborah's links, and I will see you next time. Bye.